A former Baylor coach says the victory cigar was the right call.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network, thanking you for making this your first listen today and every day. We're closing the book, I hope, on the Colorado game and talking one more time about that infamous Hail Mary, because there have been some comments from a former Baylor football coach that might be interesting to you. Also, how the players can and need to pick themselves up after that game and how they can move forward. A current Baylor Bear had an interesting answer on that, and the expansion of the Big 12. Just not the way you were thinking of. That's all coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. The victory cigar. The call that Dave Aranda gave to his defense when the game was on the line with 2 seconds left in regulation, and Colorado, once again, the miracle Hail Mary, just like 1994, as if that had something to do with it whatsoever. That was what they showed. That's what the announcer said as the, celebration was going on. Was that the right call? I and plenty of others have been perplexed by that play call and the way Baylor aligned for that final play. Colorado had to go about 45 yards. The only thing that they could do was throw a Hail Mary. They, not setting up for any field goal, not any, old school bull Scott or whatever they use in the clean version of The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler. Like, none of that. They could only throw it to the end zone to keep the game going on. And somehow that is what happened. They had a Hail Mary touchdown, and the more pessimistic ones of us could feel that lump in our stomach before that play even happened. And it happened. They should have given up a touchdown the play before. It went right off the receiver's shoulder pads, right out of his hands and out of his shoulder pads, and he would have been in for a touchdown. And instead they do it on the next play. I just felt like ripping Dave the last couple of days for that. Rushing 5 on a Hail Mary when all they needed to do was throw it to the end zone. That's all they could do. What are you doing? Dave Aranda gave an explanation in the postgame. It was a blown assignment on one of the edges that gave Shedeur a little bit more time. Okay, but still, that doesn't make sense to me. It still doesn't make sense. And former Baylor defensive coordinator Phil Bennett, who you'll remember from the Art Briles days, with some very, very good Baylor teams, he joined the Sikkim 365 Sports afternoon show and explained what he thought of the play call in great detail. And it was a very intriguing answer. But he said, I would have still rushed 5. He said, I don't think that was a bad call. Huh. Really? And he gave a good explainer as to why. He said he was thinking back to the Alabama-Auburn game last year with the 4th and whatever, 20-something, where all Alabama could do was go to the end zone. And I think Auburn only rushed 2. And Jalen Milroe had all day to throw. All day. And the receivers had all day to extend their routes. And therefore, the corners had all day that they needed to cover them. And so he said, I would absolutely rather rush 4 or 5 guys in that scenario where they have to go to the end zone and just not give them all day. And I understand that. I don't agree, but I understand that. I would also argue that Baylor was having to do that all night long. Like, as good as their pass rush was for a lot of the night, Shedeur is that elusive. And so you had to, as defensive backs, do that extra coverage all night long. I want as many reinforcements back there as possible. Now, Phil Bennett made another point in this interview that I thought made a ton of sense with critiquing the defensive formation. He said, I would rush 5, but you look at the end zone, you only had 2 safeties down there from what I saw before the play. And there's one where I'm already X the box. That's not, I'm always going 3 safeties down there, 3 people in the end zone. It's just a simple math equation there in terms of ground they need to cover. But the thing that Phil Bennett pointed out was where your safeties are placed. And in this case, I believe it was Corey Gordon. They were both placed in the middle of the end zone, 4 yards deep into the end zone. Why? How does a team call a timeout before that play and your safeties line up halfway into the end zone? And Phil Bennett put it perfectly. He said, I would have my guys on the goal line. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you need the National Guard to get them off the goal line. Isn't that so obvious? Or at least like the one? Like the only thing they can do to keep this game going is score a touchdown. And the whole point of the prevent defense is to keep everything in front of you. Why are you allowing a window for their receivers to get into the end zone? How? That's your safety being 8 yards, 4 yards, 1 yard into the end zone does you no good. None. By even allowing them into the end zone, you're already setting yourself up for failure. Already. There's a reason why so many Hail Marys go to the middle of the field and they go to about the 1 yard line. Because you can't let anything behind you. And you're just allowing them that room by being 4 yards deep in the end zone. That doesn't make sense to me. And what it tells me with the rush and where they were set up in the defensive backfield, that they were playing for a sack. And if Dave Aranda was right about what the missed assignment was, they might have gotten close to a sack. That's true. But maybe I'm too conservative when I'm thinking about play calling, but I'd rather just use the defense that's going to keep a team out of the end zone in that situation rather than playing for a sack against a bad offensive line. I can see how that's playing to some of your strength, but to me, it's out of the question. You're playing situationally. This is the most situational football situation you can be in. End of game, 1 play. The only thing that will keep this game going is if they throw a Hail Mary touchdown. Anything else is fine. A Hail Mary to the 2 yard line, fine. Anything else, fine. Just don't let them get behind you in the end zone. And instead, Baylor trotted out a defense out there after a timeout, a defense called Victory Cigar that allowed an opportunity for victory for the other team. If you have 3 deep safeties there, all lined up at the goal line, it becomes a hell of a lot harder to score on you. And you are not allowing that window of opportunity in the end zone for them to catch a Hail Mary touchdown. Instead, you only had 2 back there. They had a long way to go, which, I mean, they probably should be over towards the boundary anyway when the ball goes up in the air. You had a long way to go, and you were deep in the end zone. And that costs you the football game. Instead of playing it safer, 3 safeties on the goal line, you decided to go for a rush, and it bit you in the butt. And to me, you have no one to blame but yourselves when it comes to that. So I understand what Phil Bennett's saying there about the rush. It's an excellent interview. Go check it out. But I understand what Phil Bennett's saying about the rush. But it does not do it just doesn't do enough for me with the way they were lined up in the defensive backfield. I thought it was a poor defensive alignment and poor defensive play call. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You might know it as America's #1 sportsbook. And I'm reading the wrong ad, but we're just going to switch them. Hey, NFL fans, did you know you can start your season with a big return on FanDuel? Because when you get your hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. Let me say that again. You're going to get a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And hopefully that is the end of the Colorado game talk, or at least the Hail Mary talk, because I'm going to pull some post-game sound in just a second here. I hope that we're done with that, with the victory cigar. I'm going to aim to be, okay, people? But it was a glorious week of having a lot of Colorado fans watching, most of them pretty cool. It sounds like what that was like at the game, too, that there were some ne'er-do-wells that have latched on to Colorado, but for the most part, I've seen a lot of level-headed Colorado commenting in here. Now, talking their mess, sure, absolutely. That you won the game. You deserve to do that. But in terms of the aftermath of this game and moving forward, it's not easy. This is a crushing defeat. Anyone who has been a part of one of these in any capacity, player, coach, parent, yes, fan, it's not easy to just pick up the pieces and go on to the next game. And I find it especially hard for a team that isn't very used to winning, which is what this Baylor team is now. You know, of still a lot of young guys there that are coming off a 3-9 season, and all of a sudden they have their heart ripped out on a game that they finally felt like they should have won, that they played well enough to win, and it didn't happen. Because we talk about what could have happened if Baylor had won this game. Then all of a sudden, you're 3-1 Baylor. You might even be receiving votes. You're 3-1 Baylor facing 4-0 BYU. And you might still have that 11 a.m. Central time slot, but there's also a chance that Big Fox is there rather than FS1 11 a.m. There's a big difference. Big difference. And all of a sudden, you are ending September with some serious momentum. And you're taking on a ranked team, feeling very good about yourselves. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And you are faced with a situation where you have to pick yourselves up, pick your brothers up, and push forward against a good football team and try to avoid starting 0-2 in the conference schedule, which is not an easy thing to do and something that Baylor has struggled with in the last few years as well. So when asked about picking up the pieces after such a gut-wrenching loss, here's what Baylor linebacker Kyler Jordan had to say.
Where do you go from here? What's the next step?
I think the biggest thing is we can't let this turn into what it did last year. You know, it's going to come down to what we do next week. You know, losses are going to happen. This is football. This is Big 12 football. You know, so it's really about how we bounce back. We can't do what we did last year. So, and I think as many of the guys in the locker room that were here last year, we're not doing that again. So
we can't let it turn into what it turned into last year. That's all we can ask for. And that's all fans really want. After a 3-9 season, don't fall into the same habits of last year. I've said it several times through this first month of the football season, And even after a gut-wrenching loss like we just saw, which there is no excuse for, I am going to stick by this. I think they're a better team than last year. The time is coming in the next few weeks to really prove that. But last year, that team would have folded. And if they had gotten a gut punch like that, it probably would have been bad for a stretch afterwards. Now, last year, their gut punch loss came to Utah, and they did pick up the pieces and win the next week. It was against Long Island. And then they lost big time to the University of Texas in a game they were never in. Because I think there was a confidence issue on that team. And I say a win over Long Island, it really wasn't pretty in the first half. I think it was 14-7 at halftime of that game, and it was like 30-7 the final. So it was not all sunshine and rainbows in that game over FCS Long Island. And the mentality of this team is what needs to change first. And clearly they know that, right? Because there were other games that they felt good about themselves at some points last year, and it didn't turn out well. Utah crumbled in the end. Kansas State, they scored on the first drive. They ended up allowing 60 points in that game, 59 points in that game. Tech, they got hit in the mouth. UT, they got hit in the mouth. There's plenty of those where they just felt like they didn't even show up. And at UCF hit in the mouth, and they actually won that game. But I think that's such an important juncture for this team right now and for Dave Aranda's tenure at Baylor. You have been hit in the mouth. You have a hurdle here. You think you're better than last year. Some of us think you're better than last year. But it is time to prove that you are better than last year. And is it harsh that you now have to show us that against a ranked team the next week? Yes. But that's what this game is. And that's why we put on our big boy pants, and it's in the Big 12. And I'm at least glad that they recognize that. This can't be last year. It is time to go out there and prove it. We have seen a better effort. So far, check. That is the bare minimum. You've checked that box. We've seen a better effort. But at some point in this big boy conference and this big boy program, you've got to have the win strung along with it. It has to come now. It has to come in the next few weeks here. It has to. We're out of moral victory stage. Out of it. We didn't even have one on Saturday because I think you're going to look up at the end of the year and see that Baylor and Colorado are close in terms of their quality as a team. And again, you could see Colorado lose 2 of the next 3 games. They have a tough schedule in the next few weeks. It is time to start winning games. We are done with the moral crap. And I think these players are too, to be honest. It's time to turn those moral victories into regular, good old-fashioned, all-American football victories. No prefix. And that is the crucial part of this week, is to not let this thing become more than it is and become 2023 when you are a team in 2024. And this is what I worry about. These players, they just all went through 2023. It's easy to slip back into bad habits. This coaching staff, when have they had to pull this team up by the scruff of their necks? First off, most of these guys are new. But when has Dave Aranda had to really pull this team up from their bootstraps? 3 years ago? Because once they faced some adversity towards the end of the year in 2022, they laid down. They went from 6-3 to 6-7. Last year, you had a great comeback victory against UCF. You had a win against Cincinnati shortly thereafter. And then you didn't win again. You fell to 3-9. And, you know, you look at the West Virginia game where they felt they had that in control. You blew that one too. So it's up to a mentality thing now, not just the physical. We see that they are more talented than last year on both sides of the ball. I'm not going to argue with that. I will defend that, actually. But now it's a mental game. Can these kids pick up the pieces, and can this coaching staff rally them to turn this thing around and start winning games? I think this is a team that still has the capability to win some games that we don't expect them to. Although you might be a favorite in Vegas now, this game this weekend is a game that a lot of people are not going to expect you to win. How are you going to come up with that and turn this thing around? And how is the Big 12 expanding? We're going to talk about that next. But first, I'm going to go with the correct read. I promise we have flipped them, but you didn't even need to know that. I'm just honest to a fault like Dave Aranda, okay? Because when you are tackling your to-do list this fall, 5-hour energy is what's going to get you through that. Whether it's a long list for work or your DIY projects at home, you take a 5-hour energy shot and you can check everything off that list. As if you're like me, you got a lot going on in the fall, a lot of projects, long checklist. 5-hour energy is what gets me through that. That is the most essential supply in my day. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore. Watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, so much more. Just try them. Try them all. You have the option to build your own 12-pack or your own 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. Go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com and get some 5-Hour Energy today. You could use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and can't be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. But once again, that is locked on CFB to receive 20% off at 5hourenergy.com. Have you guys noticed I struggle saying 5-Hour Energy? Like, I don't get it. It's like Germans trying to say the word squirrel. Look that up. You'd be surprised. It's very funny. I have trouble saying 5-Hour Energy. 5-Hour Energy. 5-Hour Energy. The way I talk, the Boston accent that's been kind of cut from my lexicon. Words that end with R and start with a vowel are tough. They roll together. 5-Hour Energy. There we go. Whew. Do I have the energy to get through this segment? Yes, because I took a 5-hour energy shot. I'm not even making this up. Anyway, the Big 12 is expanding. They need a 5-hour energy. There you go. They need the energy to keep this thing going. And there's been a lot of talk about conference expansion in the last 24 hours or so. And let me say this, the Big 12 is not adding teams, but they might be adding something more important. They are adding networks. I am talking about Big 12 basketball, the best basketball conference in America, still the dogfight that it always is. No matter what you say, Brad Brownell. And I don't have much of a leg to stand on now anymore because of Baylor's second round exit last year. But they are expanding the best conference in America in terms of how you see it. Because, according to Amanda Kristovich, CBS Sports has struck a sub-licensing agreement with ESPN for Big 12 men's basketball. And that deal is going to go through 2026-27. That means Big 12 will be on CBS, Fox, and ESPN. That's something rare for ESPN to do, by the way. It's not something they do often. And they are the only power conference with that slate. How about that? So the new agreement is going to add 20 games per year to air on the CBS Sports Network and bring the total number of Big 12 men's basketball games to at least 26 per season across the CBS streaming platforms. Hopefully that means we get my favorite sideline reporter, Jenny Dell, on some games. I hope that's the case. But also what that means for those of you who hate ESPN Plus and hate paying the extra money and trying to find it, there's going to be less games on that. Just bare math right there. There's going to be more on CBS Sports. There's going to be more on CBS. There's going to be more on Fox and Fox Sports 1. The way that you find it for college football, it's available through so many, if not all, cable providers. It's going to be very tough to miss Baylor basketball games, which is what we care about in the wintertime. We want to watch our Baylor basketball. Is Baylor a basketball school? Depends on who you ask. Depends on who you ask. You guys know how I lean. I think that is so great for this conference and for basketball, college basketball. I think more importantly, it is huge for college basketball. This is the Your Mark vision. And what he is trying to do with this conference is close the gap between college football and college basketball. Because likely, college basketball is never going to be quite as popular as college football. It is the next biggest moneymaker for sure. But nothing touches the world of college football and college athletics. This is a step towards making that gap a little bit tighter. And when you are building the best basketball conference or have built the best basketball conference in America and are flirting with the idea of adding schools only for their basketball program, essentially, UConn, then this is the kind of marketing you have to get going. These are the kind of deals you got to make. That we are now going to bring it to 3 different networks, not just ESPN and the great things that ESPN Plus does with Big 12 now, 3 different networks and family of networks. You're welcome, college basketball. The Big 12 is helping you big time. And those of us at the top of Big 12 basketball are helping all the time. That's Baylor. That's Kansas. That's Houston. That's now Arizona. That's Iowa State. That's Texas Tech. We're helping y'all out, the rest of you in this conference and the rest of you in college basketball. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think this is actually going to bridge the gap a little bit? I know it's not ever going to be there, just like no one's ever going to be the SEC in football. But like this is a step. This is a step, and it's a step towards the Big 12 owning live college basketball. The way Big East had a real stranglehold when I was a kid. And that gets your school out there much more. If you were watching around my time, it was Big East all the time. Big Monday, Wednesday doubleheaders, Tuesday doubleheaders, and it was Pitt, Georgetown, Syracuse, UConn, all these Big East schools were on all the time, and therefore they were always in the top 25 because people saw them more. That's what's happening with the Big 12 right now. So now the kids growing up are going to think college basketball, and they're not going to think these small Catholic schools on the East Coast the way I did. They're going to be thinking Baylor, Kansas, Arizona, Iowa State. That's a basketball school. Tech. Ooh, is that a basketball school? Houston. That's a basketball school. That's what they're going to be thinking of. And this deal is a step in the right direction. It's big enough news that I am adding it to a week of crazy college football stuff going on in our neck of the woods, because I think it's that important for Baylor and for college basketball and the growth of this conference. That's what's going to help. Dominating basketball is going to help keep the Big 12 a Power 4 conference, and hopefully in the next few years, a Power 3 conference and a seat at the table. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about that. And of course, let me know what you think about the Hail Mary play design. It's bad enough that it happened, but did they get this right by trying to rush Shedeur in this play? And if this team can pick itself up by its bootstraps, how do they do it? Do you believe they can do it? Drop that down in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. 5 days a week. We're the only ones that are not in partnership with Baylor University that is bringing you nothing but Baylor exclusive content. So thank you once again for making it your first listen today and every day. I appreciate the heck out of you guys. And we'll see you tomorrow on Locked On Baylor.